Hey guys, it's Julie, designer at the Quilted Cow, and today's tutorial is going to be on the Check It Out by Annie's pattern. But first I'd like to thank my sponsors, Wilmington Prints, Creative Grids rulers, mats, and rotary cutters, and Husqvarna Viking sewing machines. Let's begin. The Check It Out is one of the most versatile little scissor cases. It comes in two sizes. This is the large version. It has a cute magnetic closure, and it'll carry a great big pair of scissors. The other one carries a small pair of snips. This is perfect for traveling or anytime you need to take it somewhere. It also has a hanging tab just to store it in your craft room. You can find this kit on our website at thequiltedcow.com or on our Facebook Lives on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Let's begin with the first step. The first step you're going to do is to quilt your fabric. To do that, you want to take your lining and your foam and then your main fabric and lay them all together, wrong sides touching the foam, and then you're just going to quilt it. The back of the pattern says that stripes are easiest, so that's what I've done on this one. Once you have this part done, we're just going to trim it. So once you have it trimmed to the size that you're needing, the large and the small cases are different on this particular instruction. We're going to move on to the next step, which is our interfacing. So you want to put your interfacing on the wrong side of all of your pieces it calls for. So you just want to apply your interfacing to the wrong side of your fabrics. This is the only one that's going to be different, and you're going to put it 1/4 of an inch away from all the sides. Just kind of center it in the middle before you apply and fuse it. Once the interfacing is finished, you're going to set that all aside. The next piece you're going to need is your square that you're going to use for the bias binding. Now to do this, you want to cut it at an angle. Once you have this cut in half, you're going to sew it back together so you can get it on the bias. Once you have it sewn, you're going to take it to your pressing station or to your mat, and we're just going to press this open. Once you have it all pieced and pressed, you should have a parallelogram that looks just like mine. Now what we're going to do is turn it, and we're going to cut our binding. So you want to turn it so that a flat edge is in front of you on either your right or left side. And then we're just going to take our ruler and we are going to measure over. If you want a 2.5 inch binding, go ahead and cut a 2.5 inch. I'm going to cut a 2 1/4 because that's what the pattern calls for. Now you're going to need 3 strips to do this, so go ahead and cut all 3 of them right now. Once you have your strips sewn, we are just going to step to our machine and sew them together. Okay, once you have your strips all sewn together, what we're going to do is just go in and trim off our points. After you have all your points trimmed, we're going to press these seams open as well. Now the back of your binding should look like this. Next, what we're going to do is to trim one end so it's straight. Now for this, you need to have different measurements. This is going to be the binding part that we're cutting off. So what we need to do is just measure down. Depending on what size you're making is how many inches you need to measure. So I'm making the large. I'll be measuring 6 inches down, and I'll just be trimming it right even with my 6-inch line. The next part you're going to need is your hanging tab. So you need to find the piece that you labeled with your hanging tab, and we're just going to make this by folding it in half and pressing it. Then we're going to open up and fold our raw edges right to that center crease on both sides. And we're going to go down and start pressing at one end while we fold to the other. Once you have those seams pressed, just fold it back in half and press. Now your hanging tab should look like mine. What we're going to do next is step to our machine, and we're going to sew down both these long edges. Once you have it nice and finished and both of your sides are top stitch, we're going to fold our tab in half to make a cute little loop. Next, we're just going to step to the machine and add a little base stitch in here to hold it in place while we work. Once you've completed your hanging tab and it's in this perfect little loop, we're just going to set this aside, and the next step we're going to do is work with our magnet. So we need to start by making some marks. I'm going to be using this medium size little ruler to make my marks, and with the large you're going to be doing the same size as the small. So I'm just going to draw my line at 1.5 inches, and then I'm going to draw another one at 2.5 inches. So your project should look like this, where you have 2 lines. Next, we're going to measure in and find the square where our center magnet is going to go on this. So you just want to take your ruler and measure in from the side. Now for this one, the size for the large and small is different. So we're just going to measure in 1 7/8 and draw another line. And we're going to repeat this step on the other side. So what we're going to do next is to set our magnet. Now that you have your interfacing stitched down, what we're going to do next is to cover it up. We're going to be using our front border fabric. That's the interface, the one that had the interfacing that was just a little bit small. So what we're going to do is to place this on top of our main fabric, lining up the top edge, wrong side up, right with this bottom line that we drew under our magnet. I'm going to put some clips to hold this in place while I stitch. And we're just going to sew right here across this top edge. Let's step to our machines and sew this in place. So once you get this done, you're just going to finger press it up. You can run an iron right along this bottom edge if you want to. And then we're just going to turn this so that we can measure our angle. Now this angle is going to depend on if you're right or left-handed. If you're right-handed, you want the lower side to be on the right. If you're left-handed, you want the lower side to be on the left. So we're going to measure down and mark right on this 1 3/8 of an inch. So you're going to mark right on the edges, the 1 3/8 of an inch. Now this is the line that we're going to use, and we're going to go up to this top left corner, or if you're left-handed, to your top right corner. And we're just going to draw a line right here. This is the angle, so it'll make it easier to get your scissors out of the pocket. So next you want to take your rotary cutter and cut right on the line that we just drew. Once you have this piece cut, we're going to step to our machine and we're going to sew the sides and across the top. Now you have the rest of your pocket shaped and nice and even. You've stitched along it to keep it nice and secure while you're working. Next, we're going to find that little piece of binding that we cut and we're going to attach this. So on the back of the pattern, it gives you little instructions on how to best bind. It does say that not to press this in half, that you would get a cleaner edge. So with this project, I've done that. Typically, I press it so it's nice and flat, gives me a great fold every time. But this works very well too, I've found. So we are going to turn it over so we have our lining side. We're going to place both of our raw edges right on this top angle. Now your fabric is going to hang over on both sides of your project just a little bit, and that's perfectly fine. We'll trim that up later. So we're going to step to our machine and sew this in place with a 1/4 inch seam. So we're going to finger press it and fold it over so it covers up our stitch lines right here on the front. Add some pins or clips just to hold this in place. And we're going to stitch right along this folded edge, an 1/8 inch, or do an edge stitch. Either one works perfectly fine. Let's step to our machine. Now you have your binding nice and finished. The next thing we're going to do is trim up these end pieces. You can use your little snips or you can use your big scissors, either way. You could even cut it with your rotary cutter, but I'm just going to trim off the ends. The next piece we're going to be working on is we are going to take our biggest stabilizer for the back piece, and we're going to do the same magnet marks that we did on the front pocket. We are going to attach our magnet the same way we did before. Once you've sewn your magnet in place, we're going to repeat the same thing with our little square of interfacing. Okay, once you have your interfacing stitched into place, the next thing we're going to do is attach our lining. Our lining fabric is going to go right on top of our magnet side because it'll be the inside of the case and this will be the front flap. Now on this pattern, it does tell you to put your lining on and then to stitch around and to turn your project over and put your main fabric on. Since I used glue and my lining's not going anywhere, I'm going to do them at the same time. So I've turned my project over, so now I can just see the back side of my magnet square, and I'm going to glue my main fabric into place. Once again, just drawing a box. So you're going to take your big main fabric and just lay it right on top. So once I have my fabrics here together and everything's nice and smooth on both sides, I'm going to step to my machine and sew. I'm going to sew an 1/8 inch seam all the way around just to hold all my fabrics together. Once you have it stitched along the edges at your 1/8 inch seam, what we're going to do is to feel for our magnet. So when you feel the magnet, that's going to be the top of your project. You want to turn it so you have the lining side up. And you can see my magnets right in here. We're going to take our little pocket piece and make sure it's nice and level. Once you have your pocket basted into place, the next thing we're going to do is draw on our lines to form the shape that we're needing. So we went to measure from our top part right here where the magnet is, and we're just going to measure. Now, depending on if you're making the big or the little one, it's going to be a different length. So with this one, we're going to measure 5.5 inches right from this top edge. And we're just going to draw a line right across our project. Now this is going to be our fold line where the top closes to form our case. The next thing we're going to do is to start forming our shape. So we want to measure 1.5 inches in from both sides and just make little marks right on your top edge. Now we're going to repeat those marks on our bottom edge. Now this is going to help us form our shape. What we need to do next is to take our ruler and go from the line at the top edge to where it comes out here on the side. You're going to repeat that on all 4 of your corners. Once you have all of your lines drawn, your project should look like this. Now you're going to take your circle template that came in your pattern and you're going to angle it right down here at this bottom edge and just trace along it. You're going to do the same exact step on the top edge, just tracing to get the shape of your circle. Before we start cutting, we need to stitch. So what we're going to do is take our machine and sew 1/8 inch inside each one of these lines that we've drawn. Once everything is trimmed off, your project should look like this. The next thing we're going to do is attach where our hanging tab is going to be. Once you have your tab pinned or clipped into place, we're going to turn our project over so it's once again lining side up, the side with our pocket. We're going to take our bias binding strip, the end with the point, and we are going to fold it in half, starting just after where the point begins. We're going to start attaching it between the tab and the pocket piece. Now you can take and fold your bias strip in half all the way around and pin or clip it, or you can sew it as you go. So what we're going to do once we have these pinned into place is we're going to start sewing a few inches above this bottom right corner. Okay, I have attached my binding and stopped just a few inches above wherever my tab is at. Now it says you can join your binding strips however you would like. If you want to sew them on a 45-degree angle and make it nice and smooth, you sure can. I am going to take this fabric and tuck it just inside and cut it off where you won't be able to see it. Now the next step I'm going to do is to take my 45-degree angle and I'm just going to fold it over and give it a nice finger press. And I'm going to trim off where this point's sticking out here over the edge. So if you're going to be binding like me, this is what your project should look like. I've opened up this hole and just finger pressed it so it's nice and flush so you get a nice finished edge. And then I'm going to take this part, the little tail of my binding strip, and tuck it right inside. So then it'll give a nice finished edge. I'm going to continue stitching my binding in place, catching my tab in the process. Okay, now that I have finished stitching on my binding, what I'm going to do next is to trim off this piece of the tab that's hanging out. Then we're going to take our binding strip and we're just going to start folding it over and pressing it away from our lining. Now the ends here, since it is binding strip, are really bad about trying to curl up into itself, so you just want to push those flat with your fingers. Now you can take some clips or some pins and you can go around your entire project just holding this binding so it's covering your stitch or your seam lines. Once you have all of your clips into place and your binding is on the right side, what I'm going to do next is to turn my project back over, and we're going to stitch from this side. I'm just going to do a little stitch in the ditch seam, and it will catch this fold on the back side while I'm going. So that way you get a nice finished look. If you would like, you can just stitch on this side, just do a little edge stitch, an 1/8 inch seam all the way around, get it nice and perfect. Once you have all of your clips out and you're completely finished with your top stitching, your project should look just like this. The next thing we're going to do is to fold our project right here on this little line we've drawn, and our magnets should stick together perfectly. We're going to give this a nice little finger press right along this top edge, and our magnets fit together just perfect. The final step you want to do is to erase all the lines that you've made. So this is the perfect project to take with you anywhere. Nice and super simple. You can quilt it as however you desire. If you would like the Check It Out kit, you can find it on our website at thequiltedcow.com or on our Facebook Lives on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Please like and subscribe for more tutorials, and thanks for watching.
Okay, you wicked cool quilters, good job. You made it to the end. We would like to thank our sponsors, Husqvarna Viking Sewing Machines, Creative Grids, rulers, rotary cutters, and mats, and Wilmington Prints for the beautiful fabrics. Thanks for watching.